For many golfers, breaking 80 can be a huge milestone. So let's go meet up with PGA professional Jack Backhouse, who's going to give us 5 tips on how to get through that milestone. So for people who are trying to break 80, what are a few really simple strategy plans that they can stick to throughout the round?
Yeah, so I think they've got to look at the par 5s and try and play those as aggressively as possible. Anyone who's looking to break 80 can get to the par 5s in 3, no problem, and sometimes in 2. So anytime you've got a clear shot and you can go straight at the flag, well, not the flag, but down at the green, that's got to be the best choice. And I think what you've got to decide is if there's a short hole where the fairway's quite narrow, or there's bunkers at bad yardages or hazards or whatever, don't be afraid of taking an iron off the tee. Don't just drop down to the 3-wood, because we're not really any more accurate with the 3-wood. Go to the hybrid or even the 4 or 5 iron, get the ball in the fairway on the tight holes, take your medicine and just try to get out of there with it without making any high scores.
And then if we say move into approach play, I would be wanting people to say play to the fat side of the pin, so they're not really taking on tucked pins.
Yeah, going even further with that is I almost want players playing away from flags on pretty much all the time, not just tucked pins. You know, on every green they're designed for bunkers and hazards and stuff to sort of try and trap the golfer and force you into positions where you're going to drop shots. If you can decide that day that you're going to play away from flags, aim for fat sides, aim away from trouble, you're going to have far less double bogeys. You're going to make bogey at worst, but loads and loads of easy pars. When you're trying to break 80, it's not about how many birdies you have, getting rid of the doubles altogether and having fewer and fewer bogeys.
So if someone's hit it offline, what should they be thinking about?
I think the first thing to think about when you've hit it offline is accepting the fact that you've hit a bad shot. You know, we're in a bad spot now. The thing that we definitely don't want to do is compound errors and continue to make bad decisions and hit bad shots. So something that I see all the time when I'm playing golf with amateurs is they hit the ball offline, they're in the trees, and I can sort of see them trying to eye up the flag through the trees.
Yeah, there's a gap up there somewhere.
Yeah, there's a gap up there somewhere, and I'm sure there is, but you've missed a 60-yard wide fairway. What are the odds of you now nailing it through a 2-yard wide gap? So I think the biggest thing for amateurs, if you're offline, you're out of position, the best thing to do is get a club out like an 8-iron and just chip it back out into the fairway. Don't take on any more risks. What we've got to do is just not make double. It's easy to make a double when you're offline than it is to make a par. So just chip it out, give yourself an easy, straightforward shot on the green, knock it on and get away. Don't turn a bad shot into a series of bad shots and rack up a high number.
So we're always going to miss greens, but if we're trying to break 80 realistically, we need to be getting up and down quite a lot. So how can people think about picking the right shot at the right time?
The first thing I do when I get to the ball is I have a look at the lie, because really the lie itself will determine what's the right shot to play. So if the ball's sat on mud and there's no grass underneath it, basically any club with loft is out of the question for me, because there's too much risk. There's not enough reward really for choosing that high lofted shot. I think the worst outcome here is we have to be on the green. We've always got to get on the green, and we just want to give ourselves looks, looks at putts and looks at pars. If I'm on a bad lie and there's no grass underneath it, it doesn't matter what's in front of me, I'm going to hit my low shot. I'm going to get the 8-iron out, I'm going to sort of try and semi-thin it, I'm going to get the ball running, and I'm going to do my best to try and run it at the hole. But if I find a lie with a bit of grass underneath, like this one where I've now got to go over a mound or over a bunker or whatever, I'm now quite comfortable taking the loft, using the lob wedge and floating it up in the air a little bit.
So a lot of times it's quite good to have two kind of contrasting different options. So it really makes you it forces you to have a choice. Am I going high or am I going low with this? And you're not kind of stuck in the middle of not being quite sure what to do, because I think that indecision often leads to bad shots more than actually just bad execution.
Yeah, definitely. I think with iron sets nowadays, the lofts are strong and people might have 3, 4, 5 wedges in the bag that around the green all do a fairly similar thing. So my preference for people generally is having a shot that goes very low and runs most of the way, and then have a shot that sort of goes straight up in the air and will fly most of the way. As soon as you've seen the lie, and the lie will basically dictate what the shot is, you can then go, right, I'm getting my 8-iron out and it's going low, regardless of what I'm going to do with it. Or I get my lob wedge out and think, right, I now need to get under the ball, it's going high. I'm not trying to hit it low with spin or anything like that, it's just up in the air, pick my landing spot and try and get up and down.
When it comes to putting, do you think people kind of lose shots out of frustration a lot of times because they get annoyed they've not holed like a 30-footer when realistically the chance of them holding that is pretty slim?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a big sort of misunderstanding with amateurs of, actually what is a good putt, what is a good outcome for the shot in front of you. So we know that outside of 8 feet on tour, they're making less than 50%, and it's a dramatic drop off, isn't it, outside of 15 feet. As not a tour player, if my ball's outside of 10 feet, yes, I'd like it to go in, but actually it's not the end of the world if I don't. And often I'm trying not to, I'm almost thinking, this doesn't have to go in for me for it to be a good putt.
Where's the best miss is almost the right thing to be thinking
about.
Yeah,
absolutely. If you're over 25 feet, which, we get that probably 4 or 5 times around, the worst thing you can do is 3-putt. So what you don't want to be doing is, if you've not made a putt all day, standing there thinking, right, I'll give this a bit of extra and see if I can knock this one in, but instead staying patient and going, well, the odds of me knocking this in are less than 5%, so actually all I should be trying to do here is 2-putt. So where do I want to be hitting my second putt from? So on this one, for example, we're putting uphill. The easier putt would be short, so I want to leave myself an uphill putt. Where if I was putting downhill, actually I probably will hit it a bit harder because I want that uphill putt coming back, because I certainly feel a lot more confident on those ones than the slippery downhillers.
Off the tee, do you think people kind of rack up scores by trying to hit 2 shot shapes and also not committing to hitting driver enough?
Yeah, definitely. So statistically, we know that the further down you are in every hole, the more likely you are to have a lower score. Sounds really obvious, but a lot of people are like taking 3-woods and hybrids and irons off tees for safety, when actually it makes much more sense just to knock driver down and have a shorter club into the green. But where that goes wrong for people is not accepting what their shot shape is. So if you hit a fade, accept you hit a fade and just aim up the left and play for it. Trying to do too much. So it's hard enough to hit shots on demand, high, low, draw, fade regularly anyway. And with the driver, it's even harder. So what you're much better off doing is knowing your shape and then just playing for that one shape all the time. If you fade it, just only hit fades. And if you draw it, just only hit draws. Certainly don't stand out on the course and try and do something that you don't normally do.
So really it's important to kind of stick to that stock shot, and unless there's kind of something across the fairway like bunkers that driver's going to run into, you really want to be hitting drivers wherever you can.
Absolutely, yeah. As you say, unless there's something really specific, like the trees have grown in right at your yardage, or there's a ditch or a bunker that would cost you at least 1 shot, you want to be hitting driver on as many holes as possible, giving yourself the best chance of having as many short irons in, because you're going to get it on the green a lot more with your 8-iron than you are your 5-iron.